The restaurant my parents had chosen for their 30th anniversary dinner was the kind of place that required reservations weeks in advance and had cloth napkins folded into elaborate shapes at each place setting. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in cream linens, and the soft murmur of polite conversation created an atmosphere of refined celebration. My parents sat at the head of the long table, surrounded by family members who'd gathered to commemorate 3 decades of marriage. My brother Tyler had been holding court for the past 20 minutes, regaling our cousins with stories about his apartment search in the city. He'd just been promoted to senior analyst at his firm, and he was looking at one-bedroom apartments in trendy neighborhoods, discussing square footage and amenities with the enthusiasm of someone who believed his life choices were endlessly fascinating. "The place I'm looking at in Logan Circle has granite countertops and a gym in the building," Tyler was saying, gesturing with his wine glass. "Rent's steep at $2,800 a month, but with my new salary I can swing it. Dad's co-signing the lease just to be safe, but I'm basically carrying it myself." I sat quietly at the far end of the table, next to my husband Adrian, letting Tyler have his moment. My mother's heavy perfume, Chanel No. 5 applied with a generous hand, hung in the air, making it slightly difficult to breathe. Adrian's hand rested casually on my knee under the table, a steady presence that grounded me. Aunt Margaret, my mother's younger sister, had been quiet during most of the dinner, but I'd noticed her watching the family dynamics with sharp attention. She'd recently moved back to the area after spending 15 years in California, and this was one of her first extended family gatherings since her return. When she set down her fork and smiled at me, I felt a shift in the air. "How's life after that $890,000 condo down payment his parents gave you?" she asked, her voice clear and carrying. The effect was immediate and total. Tyler's voice cut off mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open slightly. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. My father, who'd been nodding along to Tyler's apartment stories, froze with his wine glass halfway to his lips. Around the table, conversations died as heads turned toward me. "What down payment?" Mom whispered, though in the sudden silence, everyone heard her. I took a sip of my wine, a beautiful Bordeaux that Adrian's parents had sent over as their anniversary gift to my parents, though my mother had barely acknowledged it beyond a stiff thank you card. "The down payment Adrian's parents gave us for our condo," I said calmly. "We closed on it 9 months ago." Aunt Margaret leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing at her lips. "I had lunch with Patricia and Richardson last week. They showed me photos of the place. Absolutely stunning. 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit in that new development overlooking the waterfront. The one with the rooftop terrace and concierge service." Tyler had recovered enough to speak, though his voice came out higher than usual. "That building, those units started over $1 million. $1.3 million actually," Aunt Margaret corrected pleasantly. "Patricia and Richard put down $890,000, which gave Adrian and their daughter enough equity to secure very favorable mortgage terms. The monthly payment is actually quite reasonable given the circumstances. Less than what Tyler's paying for his rental if I'm remembering the numbers correctly." My mother looked like she might faint. She'd gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup, one hand pressed against her chest as if checking her own heartbeat. "You bought $1 million condo?" "How?" 9 months ago, I repeated. "We didn't announce it because we wanted to settle in first. Get used to the space. Make it feel like home before we started having guests." My father found his voice, though it came out strangled. "An $890,000 down payment? That's more than this house is worth." "Well, Patricia and Richard have been quite successful," Aunt Margaret said, as if discussing something as mundane as the weather. "Richard's software company was acquired by Google 3 years ago. Patricia's medical practice has expanded to 4 locations. They're very comfortable financially, and they wanted to ensure their son and daughter-in-law had a solid foundation." She paused to take a sip of her wine, letting the information settle. "They were quite thoughtful about the whole thing. Had their financial advisor work with Adrian and their daughter to structure everything properly. The condo is titled in both their names with survivorship rights. Very smart estate planning." Tyler looked like someone had punched him. "You own a condo worth over $1 million? "We have a mortgage," I clarified. "But yes, we own it. 2 bedrooms, 2 full baths, a study that Adrian uses as a home office, floor-to-ceiling windows with water views, a chef's kitchen that I'm still learning to properly utilize, and access to building amenities including a gym, pool, and private screening room. The details fell like stones into still water. My cousin Jennifer, Tyler's age and similarly ambitious, had stopped eating entirely. My Aunt Lisa was staring at me as if I'd suddenly sprouted a second head. Even the server, approaching to refill water glasses, seemed to slow his movements to better hear the conversation. And then, Aunt Margaret continued, clearly enjoying herself, there's the furnishing budget they provided. Another $75,000 to properly outfit the place. Patricia took your daughter shopping. Apparently they had a wonderful time selecting pieces. Patricia has exquisite taste. The Eames chairs alone cost $8,000. My mother made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. She'd spent the past year telling friends and family that she'd helped me settle into married life, with some hand-me-down furniture from their basement. She'd never mentioned that I'd politely declined her offers because Adrian's parents had already budgeted for us to furnish our home properly. "Why didn't you tell us?" my father asked, and for the first time he sounded less angry and more genuinely hurt. "Because you didn't ask," I said simply. "You assumed we were renting somewhere modest. You made comments about how we were starting small and building up slowly. You told your friends that Tyler was doing so well because he'd already moved into the city while we were still finding our footing. It never occurred to you to actually ask where we lived or how we were doing." The truth of it settled over the table like fog. Tyler's face had gone from shock to something resembling embarrassment. He'd spent months subtly putting me down to family members, making jokes about how his little sister had married a nice enough guy, but was probably struggling to make ends meet while he climbed the corporate ladder. Patricia and Richard also mentioned the HOA fees, Aunt Margaret continued as if sharing delightful gossip. "They're covering those for the first 5 years. $850 a month, which includes concierge service, building maintenance, and access to all amenities. They wanted to make sure the kids didn't feel financially stressed during the early years of marriage." "That's over $10,000 a year," my cousin Jennifer calculated quickly. "For 5 years that's $51,000, I confirmed. They were very generous. They wanted us to feel secure and comfortable. My mother had tears in her eyes now, though whether from embarrassment or genuine emotion I couldn't tell. "We would have helped if you'd asked." "Would you?" The question came out more sharply than I'd intended, but I didn't soften it. "Because when I mentioned Adrian and I were looking at places to buy, you suggested we look at condos in the suburbs, something starter-sized. When I mentioned we were getting married, you told me to keep it simple and not expect too much help because you'd already spent so much on Tyler's college loans. When I graduated with my master's degree, you took me to Olive Garden and told me you were proud, but you just bought Tyler a car for landing his first job." The comparisons hung in the air, each one a small cut that had accumulated over years. My father's face had gone from pale to red. Tyler was studying his plate as if it contained the secrets of the universe. "Different children have different needs at different times," my mother said weakly, her standard defense. "That's interesting," Aunt Margaret interjected, "because from what I observed growing up with you, Patricia, you had a clear favorite among your siblings and it wasn't based on need. It was based on who reflected best on you, who made you look good to your friends, who fit your image of success." My mother's head snapped toward her sister. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" Aunt Margaret asked mildly. "You doted on our brother Michael because he was the eldest son, the one who went to law school, the one who married the right kind of woman. You barely spoke to me for 5 years when I moved to California to pursue art. Said I was wasting my life. Funny how you suddenly became interested again when my gallery started selling pieces for 6 figures. The parallel was clear and my mother flinched. She'd replicated the same pattern with her own children, elevating Tyler because he fit her image of success while quietly diminishing me because my path was different, less conventional in her eyes. "Adrian's parents noticed the dynamic at the engagement party," I said quietly. "They saw how you introduced Tyler to your friends with pride and me with apologies. How you talked about his achievements constantly while barely mentioning mine. How you assumed we needed help but never actually offered any. We offered furniture," my mother started. "You offered hand-me-downs," I corrected. "Broken pieces from your basement that you were going to throw away anyway. Adrian's parents offered to furnish our home properly, to give us things that were ours, chosen by us that we'd be proud to own." Aunt Margaret pulled out her phone. Patricia Chin sent me some photos. May I? She looked at me and I nodded. She turned the phone to show the table, scrolling through images of our condo. The living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows and carefully curated furniture. The kitchen with its marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. The bedroom with its view of the water at sunrise. That's not a starter home, Tyler said faintly. That's nicer than some of the partners' places at my firm. It's a home, I said simply. Our home. The first place that's ever felt completely mine, where I didn't have to apologize for existing or feel grateful for scraps. The words were harsher than I'd intended, but they were true. Growing up in my parents' house, I'd always felt like I was taking up space that could have been better used by Tyler. My achievements were downplayed, my struggles ignored, my presence tolerated but not celebrated. And then there's the wedding gift, Aunt Margaret said, clearly building to something. I understand Patricia and Richard gave quite a substantial gift? Adrian shifted beside me. We'd agreed not to mention the wedding gift, but apparently his parents had shared that information with Aunt Margaret during their lunch. They gave us stocks, I said. Blue-chip stocks from Richard's investment portfolio. Current value is around $340,000. The number hit the table like a bomb. My cousin Jennifer actually gasped. Tyler's girlfriend Sarah, who'd been quiet until now, whispered something that sounded like, "Oh my God." $340,000? My father repeated, his voice hollow. They wanted us to have a nest egg, Adrian said, speaking for the first time. His voice was calm but firm. They said they'd watched how some families treat their daughters, how they assume daughters will always need rescuing or help, and they wanted to make sure my wife knew she was valued. That she had resources and security independent of anyone else's approval. The implication was clear and my mother looked like she'd been slapped. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. We gave you $5,000 for your wedding, she finally said. You did, I agreed. And Tyler, you gave me $10,000 for your college graduation party. You spent $15,000 on the car you bought him for landing his first job. You took out a home equity loan to cover his student loan payments when he was struggling. You've given him probably $100,000 over the past 5 years. You gave me $5,000 and made sure everyone at the wedding knew how generous you were being. The math was stark and undeniable. Tyler was staring at his lap, his earlier bravado completely deflated. My father had gone very still, his jaw tight. Around the table, family members were exchanging glances, recalculating everything they thought they knew about our family dynamics. Patricia and Richard also established a trust, Aunt Margaret said, and I realized she was determined to share everything. For future grandchildren. $50,000 per child, indexed to inflation. They wanted to make sure education would never be a financial burden. We don't even have children yet, I said, surprised. They're planners, Aunt Margaret said with a slight smile. They said they'd rather set things up now while they're healthy and active rather than waiting. Very prudent, really. The trust is irrevocable and managed by their estate attorney. My mother was crying openly now, tears running through her carefully applied foundation. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know any of this. You didn't ask, I repeated for the third time. You made assumptions. You decided I was struggling, that I needed your pity, that my life was less successful than Tyler's because it looked different from what you'd imagined. You never actually asked about my marriage, my home, my happiness. I'm sorry, my mother said, and she sounded genuinely broken. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry too, Tyler added quietly. I've been a terrible brother. I've been so focused on feeling superior that I never actually looked at your life. I never asked if you were happy or what you'd achieved. I just assumed. You assumed I was less than you, I finished. Because that's what Mom and Dad always implied, and it was easier to believe that than to actually get to know me. The server appeared then, asking about dessert, and the question felt absurd given the emotional wreckage at the table. My father waved him away with a tight smile. Richard and Patricia want to host a dinner party next month, Aunt Margaret continued. At their home. They're inviting family and close friends to properly celebrate Adrian and their daughter's first year of marriage and their new home. They asked me to extend an invitation to your family. She looked at my parents. They were very specific that you're all invited, but they wanted me to make clear that it's a celebration of your daughter's happiness, not an opportunity to take credit for it or to make excuses about the past. They're drawing a line, essentially. Accept that you misjudged your daughter and treat her with respect going forward, or don't come at all. The ultimatum hung in the air. My father's face had gone from red to purple. That's incredibly presumptuous. Is it? Aunt Margaret asked. Or is it honest? They've been watching your family for over a year now. They've heard the comments, seen the dynamics, noticed the dismissals. They love their son and by extension they love his wife. They're protective. And they're wealthy enough that they don't have to tolerate social niceties if those niceties mean watching someone they care about be diminished. Adrian squeezed my hand under the table. I knew this dinner party invitation was news to him too. His parents were playing chess at a level that was simultaneously impressive and slightly terrifying. We'll be there, my mother said suddenly, her voice thick with tears. Of course we'll be there. And we'll do better. We'll be better. Will you? I asked, not unkindly but genuinely curious. Because I need you to understand something. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your help. I don't need you to take credit for my success or to make excuses for not supporting me. I have a family now, Adrian's family, that sees me, values me, and invests in me. If you want to be part of my life going forward, you need to actually see me too. Not the daughter you wished I was, not the struggling child you can rescue, but the actual person I am. My father nodded slowly. We understand. I hope you do, I said. Because this is the only chance you get. Adrian's parents are kind and generous, but they're also clear about boundaries. If you come to their dinner party and make comments about how you helped me or how you always knew I'd do well, if you try to take credit or rewrite history, they'll politely end the evening and you won't be invited back. They've built their life on honesty and direct communication. They expect the same from others. Tyler cleared his throat. Can I come to the dinner party? Even though I've been an ass. I looked at my brother, really looked at him for the first time in years. He looked genuinely remorseful, his earlier arrogance completely stripped away. If you want to come as my brother to celebrate with me and get to know Adrian's family, yes. If you want to come to network or to size up how successful Adrian's parents are, no. I want to come as your brother, he said quietly. I want to know who you actually are, not who I assumed you were. I nodded. Then yes, you can come. The server returned cautiously, and my father ordered dessert for the table with a voice that shook slightly. As conversation slowly resumed, more subdued now, I felt Adrian's thumb tracing circles on my hand. You okay? He murmured. I'm good, I said honestly. This needed to happen. My parents are going to be insufferably pleased with themselves, he said with a slight smile. They've been planning this for weeks. Aunt Margaret was their co-conspirator. I looked down the table at Aunt Margaret, who raised her wine glass to me with a small smile. She'd spent years being dismissed by her own family for choosing art over law, for moving to California instead of staying local, for being different. She understood what it felt like to be overlooked and undervalued. And she'd chosen this moment, my parents' anniversary dinner, to force them to see what they'd been missing. Thank your parents for me, I said to Adrian. And thank them for the dinner party invitation even though I had no idea it was coming. They wanted it to be a surprise, he said. They're going all out, catering, live music, the works. They want to show your family what it looks like when someone is properly celebrated. As the desserts arrived and my mother attempted to compose herself, I thought about the condo overlooking the water, about the stocks in our investment account, about the trust fund waiting for children who didn't exist yet. But more than the money, I thought about what it represented. Being seen, being valued, being chosen. My parents had spent my entire life showing me I was second best, an afterthought, someone to be tolerated rather than celebrated. Adrian's parents had spent 1 year showing me the opposite. They'd invested not just money but time, attention, and genuine interest in my life. The question now was whether my parents could learn to do the same, or whether our relationship would remain forever surface level, maintained for appearances but lacking real depth. As we left the restaurant an hour later, my mother hugged me tightly, her heavy perfume overwhelming as always. I'm sorry, she whispered again. I'm so sorry I didn't see you. Then start seeing me now, I replied. It's not too late. Whether it was or not remained to be seen. But as Adrian and I drove home to our waterfront condo with its floor-to-ceiling windows and carefully chosen furniture, I realized something important. I didn't need my parents to finally value me for my life to have value. I already knew my worth. And knowing your worth, truly knowing it, is worth more than any down payment.